Welcome to this week's reading vlog. It has been many days since I filmed. I got home from Arizona midweek and Ariana was here. She took care of the house and the dogs for me while I was away. And we had extremely bad weather. They closed the airport the day before I flew back home. Thankfully, I made it in. Supposedly my plane was the last plane that came in before they closed the airport the day that I came home, and then Ariana was going to go home later that day and they had closed the airport, so she spent another day. So we took advantage of it and spent the day doing stuff, and so I did not read. So then going back to work, catching up on email, all the things. I have not been reading that much this week, unfortunately. I did not update though. I had started Home is Where the Bodies Are because Geneva Rose was one of the authors of the conference in Arizona. And I finished this. I gave it 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I thought there was an interesting dynamic between the siblings that was very realistic and definitely did a really good job of displaying the different roles in a family that different siblings can take on. And so I appreciated that in it. It was an interesting concept. So this is where we have a family with 3 siblings, 2 daughters, and then the son is the youngest sibling. And the elder daughter has stayed home, is very dedicated to caring for their mother as she passes away with cancer. Their father had walked out 7 years previously, and they have not heard from him. And the middle child is another sister who is an addict. She's in recovery currently as their mother passes away. But she and her sister have not spoken for a year because of her addiction issues. And then the brother, the youngest child, left, went away to college and just has not come back. And he's very, very successful. So he's extremely wealthy. And there's quite a bit of resentment on the part of the elder sister towards both of her siblings for her middle sister, who lived in the same small town, but basically because of her addiction was very self-centered and didn't do anything for the mother to help the older sister. And then the younger brother, the elder sister, just feels like he abandoned them. He went off to make his way in the world and left them all behind. So she's feeling very resentful. And when the mother passes, and she literally passes in the first few pages of the book, the elder sister is calling everybody, telling them, you know, it's over, come home, basically. And they are met by their mother's attorney, who tells them how everything is supposed to be divided up. And so they are going to take a week to clean out the house, basically. And as they're cleaning out the house, they come across a box of VHS tapes and decide to put one on the TV and to remember the good times. And they watch this tape. It's of a day when there was a festival in the town that their mother was one of the organizers for. They're sort of celebrating the fact that this went so well and raised money to buy equipment for the town park. And then cut to later in the evening, and their mother is filming, she's trying to film an owl in their backyard. And all of a sudden their father comes running up, and he's covered in blood, and he tells her that he needs her help. And none of this is a spoiler. This is all in the synopsis. So far, no spoilers. But he leads her down to this creek on their property, and there is a dead body. And he basically tells her, we have to get rid of this body. And she agrees. And so they do. Now, we don't see that part. She remembers to turn off the video camera after the discussion that they have to get rid of the body. And what follows is the siblings' journey to figure out what the heck happened. And do we really know our parents? And is this why our father disappeared 7 years ago? He couldn't live with this anymore. And they start unraveling what happened. They know who the victim is, and they can't quite figure out what happened, though. And they don't understand why their father, they make the assumption that their father has done this, obviously, and they can't understand how their father would have done this or why he would have done this. It's a very good exploration of them, each in their own way, trying to piece this together, but also a coming back together of them as siblings and having to deal with these resentments and the parts of their relationship that they haven't really worked through. So I thought it was really well done. It was very engaging. I will say it was pretty easy to figure out, not that far into it, what was at the root of this. And I don't want to give anything away except for, I'm not sure if this is a spoiler, so possible spoiler. You can fast forward when I take that possible spoiler off the screen. If you've read it, you'll know what I'm talking about. When I say that the father won't tell the mother what happened. She goes along with him because she loves him and he's her husband. And he's telling her, we have to do this. But he won't tell her what happened. And he tells her it's better if she doesn't know. So it's pretty, it seemed very logical to me that he's not telling. You know, if he did it, why wouldn't he just tell her? So, you know, that was pretty easy to figure out. But it didn't take away from really the dynamics of what was going on in the book. It didn't bother me that I figured it out early on. I thought that this was really a great exploration of the sibling relationship and an exploration of, well, the mother helps him. So what we do for people that we love, and then maybe have second thoughts about them. So that was Home is Where the Bodies Are. Now, I know I made a big stink about not reading romantasy this year. I'm currently reading Curious Tides, and I don't consider this a romantasy. I believe this is young adult. Yeah, ages 14 and up. And so I think we're safe from romantasy territory. This is dark academia, young adult, and there is, I would say, a mystery at the core of this book. So this is set in a world where I believe everyone has magic, and it is all associated with the phases of the moon. So the phase of the moon that you are born under controls what type of magic you have. And there are a few different magics for each phase of the moon. So our main character, Emery, is a healer, and she is a second-year student at this prestigious magic university. But the previous year, her freshman year, her roommate, who had been her best friend for years since they were children, disappeared in a tragic accident that occurred. Now, the university is on some cliffs overlooking a beach, the ocean, and there are caves, and students are not supposed to go in the caves. But Emery had her best friend roommate, Romy. She had felt her pulling away as they got to the university. She started interacting with different people. She was sort of leaving Emery behind. And Emery took it that maybe we've been friends forever, but maybe this is just the phase of our life that we're going through, and we're drawing apart from each other. But she felt that the people that Romy was interacting with were not the best influence, and she's a little bit worried about her. So when Romy goes out one night, Emery, for whatever reason, decides to follow her and follows her down to the cave. And there she comes across Romy and 7 other freshman students performing some type of ritual. As they are doing this, the tide suddenly starts coming into the cave, but it's not timed correctly because they knew how much time they had in the cave before the tide came in, but the tide starts coming in anyway. And basically it sweeps some of them away and it kills others of them. And when Emery wakes up, she has a tattoo on her wrist that wasn't there before. And she is alive while the others are either gone or dead on the beach. So she is just obsessed with trying to figure out what they were doing and why they were doing it. And she feels like some upperclassmen were at the root of what happened. And so she's trying to almost like infiltrate their ranks to figure out, was this a hazing? Was this an initiation of some type? What is going on here? Now, Romy's older brother is also at the school, and he is eclipse born. So he was born during an eclipse. It's very, very rare, as you would expect. And people who are born under an eclipse their magic is much more powerful than any of the other moon phases. So people are very afraid of them. And someone who is eclipse born can actually collapse with a capital C because they can lose control of their magic. It's so powerful they can lose control of it, and it may harm other people. And this has actually happened to Romy, and his name is Baz. Romy and Baz's father collapsed a few years ago. So their family is just like one tragedy after another. Their father collapses. He's taken away and put into an institute, and his magic is being contained there. And then Romy is killed in this event in the cave. So Baz is there, and he just wants to graduate. He wants to be a professor. He's trying to keep his head down, etc. Now, he did have a crush on Emery, but nothing ever came of it when they were in school, before they got to college. And she's aware of it. She knew that he had a crush on her, but it never went anywhere. They were old enough to start thinking about relationships, but then his father collapsed and he sort of moved into his solitary mode, and she left him alone, basically. I feel like we're unraveling the mystery of what happened that night. Why did this happen? Did they lose track of time and the tide came in, or did somebody do something that made the tide come in early, etc.? I think the world building here has been really well done. We're in a very constrained environment, right? We're just at this university. So we're learning about the different magics based upon the students. And so you get a student and you're like learning about the magic that they have, and that's helping versus just being listed out like this moon phase has these magics, etc. So I think that was really well done. I will say there is this book that Baz is obsessed with that was written by someone who went to their university and is, more like a fantasy book is what the majority of people take it, that this is just a fantasy book. But he and others think that perhaps this author had some insights into these magical beings, and that this is actually a true story of what went on, and a little bit about the background of everybody's magic and how it's controlled by the ocean and the moon controlling the ocean, etc. So he's almost on a hunt to figure out what's at the core of this book. Is this really a historical work, or is this a fantasy? And he's very focused on that. And Emery is very focused on what happened to Romy and figuring out who was behind it and why she was there that night and how she got pulled into all of this. So they both have their thing that they're hunting for, which I really like. I will say that I am about a third of the way through the book. I'm almost at 200 pages in. It is a long book. It's over 500 pages. And at first, when the book was being referenced, I was still dealing with, the phases of the moon and the different magics. And then we started getting information about this book. And I was like, okay, hold on. This is too many things coming at me at once. And then there was a chapter that really got detailed into this book and what the book is and what the story is, basically give a summary of the story within the book. And so now I feel better about it. But if anything, if I were to criticize anything, it was just that conceptually. But I'm enjoying it. I do think Emery is a tad bit manipulative. And so I guess it makes her human, realistic. She's not perfect. She's not the perfect character. So there is that. But I think she's pretty okay with using people to get to her end goal. And I don't know how I feel about that. Anyway, I'm going to get back into reading. And so let's read. 2 weeks since my last update. And that's just because I have not been finishing books, which is really disappointing after the January that I had. So I am going to close out this vlog, which is 2 weeks worth, with the one book that I have finished, which is a reread of Silent in the Grave by Deanna Raybourn. This is coming off of the heels of rereading The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie. And I wanted to do that one because I wanted to see if it held up, and I actually enjoyed that more than I did originally. And when I looked back on this series, which is another series that I picked up with every intention of completing the series, and then just never picked up the second book. Years ago, I had only given it, at the time I was giving my ratings letter grades. Could have been because I was still teaching. And I ended up giving it a B. So for some reason, I was under the impression that I had really loved this book and I'd given it like 5 stars. But I didn't, because that would have been equivalent to a 3. And so I kind of feel like, why did I reread it? Except that she's such a loved author in the booktube community because of her Veronica Speedwell series. And you never hear anybody talking about this older series anymore. So it's like this series walked so Veronica Speedwell could run, I guess. So I'm not really sure if I liked it less, more, or equivalent, because I only gave it a B before, and giving it a 3.5 this time. Maybe I would have given it a B plus before. I don't really remember when I was giving letter ratings how it shook out. But I did end up giving it 3.5. I will pick up the next in the series. So our protagonist is Lady Julia Gray, who is having a dinner party with her husband, and he takes ill, extremely ill, and they basically take him away to his room, and he eventually dies. And upon his death, she is met by this man named Nicholas Brisbane, who tells her that he was working for her husband, who had been receiving poison pen letters, basically, and had hired him as an investigator to try to figure out who was doing this. And she's shocked. She knows nothing about this. His family historically all die young from heart disease, and so they're just assuming that he had been doing poorly. Perhaps he ate something that didn't disagree with him and it exacerbated his condition, and this was just his time to go. And so she basically drops it because it's natural causes and just let it be. But then she starts to wonder if maybe the reason that Brisbane presented himself to her is because he thinks she had something to do with his death. And so she says, yeah, let's investigate it. But time goes by. They're approaching the 1-year anniversary of the death, basically, without finding out any more information. And she starts to sense that everything was not what it seems. And so they begin the investigation, of course, figure out that he was poisoned, which is how he died. And now it's just figuring out who had access to him to give him the poison, and is it someone in her trusted circle, basically. This is taking place in Victorian England. It is well done from a historical perspective. So there is a little bit of an attempt to make this paranormal, but it's not really. So if that's not your thing, I wouldn't shy away from it because it's not a component of really resolving the mystery. We are told in the final pages of the novel that she and Brisbane are going to work again on another case, basically, leading us into what happens next. Of course, there's a romance element that doesn't go that far in this one. I'm sure it will as the series plays out. It's okay. It's like I said, I gave it a 3.5. That's above the bar for me to continue on with the series, so I will. But nothing like, ooh, I'm so glad I reread this, which is really making me second guess any other rereads for this year because it's February, I've already done 2, and I've only finished 12 books. That's a pretty high percentage. All right, I'm going to close this log out because there's not anything else to talk about, so there's no reason to keep it going. So tell your friends I said hi, and I'll see you next time.